Namaskar friends, welcome to the last session of week 5 of our discussion in work system design. So just to have a brief review of what we are covering the basic aspects of method study and trying to learn the various graphical tools and techniques that can be used to develop the best method of doing the job. Prior to method study, we have already covered the topics such as productivity, we have already covered the topics such as work study, work content determination, how the excess work content is added to the basic work content, all that we have covered. So, I will not go into the details, as in each session I go to the details of the various things or various topics which we have already covered, but today I will only discuss about the method study. Now, when we need to improve the productivity of our organization, we need to develop better, efficient, effective methods of doing the job. So, we have to develop these methods, and method study helps us to develop these methods. What can be the various tools that can be used? Now, I have already highlighted that we can start our analysis from the top level or the bird's eye view of our organization. For example, the raw material is coming in the form of trucks. We can take an example of a thermal power plant which is producing electricity. So, the raw material can be coming in the form of coal in the trucks, or it can come in railway wagons. So, we have raw material being put into the organization at the maybe a raw material store. So, we have raw material that is coming. So, incoming raw material, then this material is moving towards the boiler or where the coal has to be burnt. So, all that maybe it is a bird's eye view that how the operation is taking place in the thermal power plant. So, that can be represented by a outline process chart or an operations process chart at a higher level. Then we come down to the next level, that what is happening, or we can say the flow process chart, where we focus on one specific area within the complete organization. So, we can say that in case of a thermal power plant, the overall plant will be depicted by an operation process chart. Then maybe one particular shop or one particular segment or one particular department can be represented by a flow process chart. Then maybe one particular person, we can say, can be represented by a two-handed process chart. We can also see how a person is operating a machine. We can find out that how much is the idle time, how much is the working time for a worker, how much is the idle time and working time for a machine using a man machine chart. So, we have different types of graphical descriptions of the work being carried out. What is the objective? We want to develop a better method of doing the job. So, currently whatever is being done, we have to first plot it properly. We have to analyze the work or the current method of doing the job, and then we have to depict it in the form of a graphical diagram or a graphical chart, and then from there we have to see that how many operations are being done, how many transportations are happening, how many time we are inspecting. So, all that has to be analyzed, and then creatively we have to think with out of the box thinking that how we can develop a better method of doing the job. Can there be an alternative method of doing the job which is much more efficient, much more effective, much more productive, much more beneficial, not only from the organizational point of view but also from the workers point of view. So, with this objective we are trying to study the concept of method study, and if we are able to develop better methods of doing the jobs which can save us money, which can save us time, which can save us effort, it will definitely lead to the overall benefit or overall we can say improvement or progress of the organization. So, with this background, that why we are studying method study, why we are discussing method study, today our top topic is flow diagrams. This is an important topic from the point of view that if you remember, in this week we have seen 4 different types, maybe 3 different types of graphical tools. If you focus on the very first session, that is session number 21st in this week, we have seen the flow process chart. Then we have seen the examples of flow process chart. Then we have seen the multi-activity chart. Then we have seen, I think in the session number 23rd, we have covered, if I remember, it was the multi-activity chart. Then it was two-handed process chart, sorry, in third session it was two-handed process chart, and in the 24th session we have covered the man machine charts or multi-activity chart. So we have seen that three different types. First one is the flow process chart in this week, then the two-handed process chart, and then the multi-activity charts. I think this is what we have covered as far as I remember. Today we are discussing flow diagrams. Now some of you may be wondering that what is the difference between a flow diagram and a flow process chart. We have already studied flow process chart. So there I have used the words interchangeably. I have used the word flow process chart, but we have shown some flow process diagrams also there, and therefore I have copied the same things in today's session also to start with, to differentiate between the two terms, that is what is a flow process chart and what is a flow process diagram. So we have shown the diagrams also just to depict that how the work is happening, but a flow process chart is slightly different or a slightly different representation as the flow diagram. Let us now quickly see. This diagram we have seen earlier also. This is the current method of doing the inspection and marking. Already in this week we have seen this diagram. Now at that point of time we have not studied flow diagrams, we were studying flow process charts. So from this diagram we will construct a flow process chart. Now this is the diagram which is the flow diagram. So this is, you can see, this is the flow diagram here. What it is showing? It is showing that how the material is traveling inside the shop floor. Now this is our factory. So this is the truck, as I have already taken an example today. So the material is being offloaded from the truck and then it is moving. Then this is the receiving bench here. This is the inspection bench. This is the marking bench. And if you remember, we have tried to relocate, we have tried to change the layout in order to reduce this travel. How we have done that? That you can refer to the previous session. But here what we are trying to understand, we are trying to understand the difference between the flow process chart and the flow diagram. So this represents the flow diagram. Now what is the flow process chart based on this? This is the flow process chart. Now in flow process chart, clearly it is written here, flow process chart. So if you are doing a course, you must be able to differentiate between the flow process chart and the flow diagram. So you must be able to differentiate between the two. Now what is this? This is a flow process chart. So here we can see all the process chart symbols are used. We are using operation, transportation, delay, inspection and storage, and what is the number is also depicted here. So basically there is a difference, that how we represent the job, the activity, the work that we are accomplishing remains same, but the method of depiction is different. So this is a flow process chart. We also have drawn similar types of operation process chart also. If you remember, we have seen that how operation process chart will look like. So we have seen how the multi-activity chart will look like. We have seen how the two-handed process chart will look like. So the depiction is different, the analysis level is different. At one level we can have a overall or a bigger picture, or maybe a broad analysis which can be made by a operation process chart. In other case, we are analyzing a worker who is doing some work, we are focusing on his left hand and right hand. So the analysis level boils down to a worker and a machine. Then a worker is operating a machine, we want to find out whether the worker, how much time the worker is working, for how much time he is idle. So that can be a man machine chart. So there can be different types of charts which we will draw, but we can say the depiction will be slightly different. So here we are depicting the same operations only which are happening during this, but here if you see in flow diagram we are seeing the direction of movement also. If there is backtracking, that also we will be able to see, but it is not possible to see or observe those things in a flow process chart. So, we have taken another example also. If I ask you now what is this, already it is written here that it is an example of a flow diagram. So, here we can see that a person is coming from the kitchen and he is distributing food to the patients on the bed, and there are 17 beds in this layout. So, we are seeing the movement, the direction. So, it is a diagram basically which can be made to the scale, but how a flow process chart for this will look like. So, we have seen this already when we were discussing flow process chart and the example. So, we have seen this, that here one method can be a person moves straight and he goes to the serving table, places all the food there, and then one by one distributes the food to each and every patient on the bed. Or he can carry a trolley, and that trolley, the movement for the trolley is depicted like this, and then from here it goes like this. So, the movement of the trolley, and from here with a dotted line it is showing that the movement of the person or the person who is serving the food to the patients on the bed. So, this is maybe two different methods of serving the food to the patients is compared in this particular flow diagram. So, this is basically a flow diagram, and how a flow process chart would look like, that you can see. This is a flow process chart, this is a flow process chart, and this is one type, that is a worker type, because we are tracking the worker here in this problem. If you see, the worker is bringing the food, he is carrying a trolley here, and then he is serving in this direction all the 17 patients till here, and then goes out from this direction. So, two different methods have been compared. So, this is what which is showing the exact movement of the worker or the material, which is called the flow diagram. Even it will show the frequency. If you remember, frequency is shown here, you see two lines are there, here you see two lines, two lines, two lines. So, movement going forward, coming back is also depicted in a flow diagram, but it is not depicted in the flow process chart. Now, this is the flow process chart on your screen. This is the activity operation, this is the frequency, that how many times or how many operations are there in the current method, how many transportations are there in the current method. Then this is the improved method which is shown here, and the proposed method savings are also shown. This is the proposed method, and how many operations are there, only 18 operations are there, and then transportations are 72. So, we can see that maybe the transportations are slightly more in case of the proposed method, but the number of operations has substantially come down. So, this is the improved method, this is the current method, and what is this? This is the flow process chart. So, I think with this maybe 5 to 7 minutes of discussion, we have been able to differentiate between a flow process chart and the flow process diagram. Now, we focus our attention on the flow diagrams only, because flow process chart already in session number 21 and session number 22 we have covered, we have seen a number of examples also. Now, what is the need of the diagram? The flow process chart shows the sequence and nature of movement. We have already seen what is depicted by flow process chart, sequence and the nature of movement. This is shown, but it does not clearly show the path of the movement. So, flow process chart does not focus on the path of the movement. If you remember, the flow diagram depicts the path, that the raw material is getting offloaded from the truck and then it is moving to the receiving bench, from there it is moving to the inspection bench, from there it is moving to the marking bench. So, that movement is not depicted by the flow process chart, it is only depicted by the flow diagram. Hence, flow diagrams, string diagrams, we will see the example of string diagram, and maybe in subsequent session we will discuss string diagrams in much more detail. So, flow diagrams and string diagrams are used to record the paths also. So the movement, the direction, that also is depicted by the flow diagrams. These diagrams are useful in highlighting detrimental features in the paths of movement. Now we want to improve our method. So when we draw the flow diagram, we are drawing it with a purpose. Now what is the purpose? We want to improve the current method of doing the job. So what can be the detrimental effects, or what can be the problem areas, what can be the issues, what can be the challenges? These are backtracking. Maybe we are moving forward and then coming back. Congestion. Lot of lines are maybe going through a particular path, congestion is there. Redundancy, unnecessary movement. So these are the three problems, these are the examples: backtracking, congestion, redundancy. So we try to see with the help of a flow diagram that where there is lot of movement, where most of the lines are crisscrossing each other, there is a chance that there is lot of traffic of men, lot of traffic of material during in this particular segment or this particular area of our organization. So why not to attack this particular area, try to widen it, or maybe try to restrict the movement of material. Let us try to have a different path for material and different path for men. So maybe some modifications in the layout can be done, and this congestion or backtracking as well as redundancy can be solved. So that is the purpose of drawing the flow diagrams. Now the clarity of these diagrams makes them useful. So how they are useful? To study the different layout plans. Now we see, we have been able to find out when we suppose in an example or in a case study or in a situation or in a practical situation, we have drawn a flow diagram for a particular shop or for a particular department within the organization, and we see a lot of congestion at one place, that lot of material is getting transported or getting moved through one particular alley or one particular area only, or one particular small passage. What we can do? This is a problem now. Always there is sometimes a queue of materials to be transported through that passage. Now we can try to find out the solutions. Now what can be the solutions? It can help us, flow diagrams will help us to find out different layout plans and thereby select the most optimal layout. So we can change our layout, we can position our facilities in such a way that the passage which was earlier very small can be made bigger in size by reallocating the position of the machines. To study the traffic and frequency over different routes of the plant, which I have already told that we will be able to study the number of movements of men and material as well as the frequency of movement, and then try to realign our facilities in terms of machines, in terms of equipment, in terms of cranes, in terms of material handling system. We can redesign our layout in such a way to avoid these type of issues such as congestion and backtracking. Identification of backtracking and obstacle during the movement. So basically diagrams will help us to design our layout in a much more effective, efficient and productive manner. Now types of diagrams. Now we have seen that flow process charts are also very helpful. They help us to calculate the number of operations, they calculate the number of transportations, delays, storages, all that is also useful information for us. But from the layout point of view, flow diagrams are better as compared to the flow process chart. So flow process charts can show us the sequence, they can show us that how the activity is happening, but they cannot show us exactly on a layout that what is happening. Now for the diagrams, for that matter, diagrams are much more beneficial. Now flow diagrams you can see here, just I will read for you. So flow diagram for manufacture of a bicycle pedal axle. So raw material store, the material starts from here, this is a raw material and the cutting shed, this is a forge shop, from there it moves to the machine shop, milling section, heat treatment, assembly section, inspection, part storage. So this is showing the movement of the material. So here we can see that we know that from which shop where the material is moving, and this can be prepared as per scale also, and if we prepare it as per the scale, we can very easily calculate the movement in terms of meters or maybe centimeter, depending upon the size of the layout. So we can very easily record the movement of men and material with the help of flow diagram. So here we do not see much congestion, it is just depicting the flow of material for the manufacture of a bicycle pedal axle. For recording the movement of men and material, when the movement is simple, the path is almost fixed. So in this case it is a simple movement only. Then string diagrams can also be drawn. This is a workbench, central workbench you can see, and then different movements are depicted by these lines. So slightly complicated as compared to the flow diagram. So you can see, for recording the movement of man and material when the paths are many and repetitive. So for large number of paths and repetitive paths, we will make use of the string diagram. So string diagrams we will cover maybe in one of the subsequent sessions. Today our target is about flow diagram. So let us see the flow diagram in detail. The flow diagrams are also for maybe any process industry also, or chemical engineering industry, or a paint manufacturing industry. So you can use the flow diagrams in such situations also. A flow diagram is a graphical means of presenting, describing or analyzing a process or a movement of material and man. So here this is just one example. This is submarine nuclear reactor flow sheet, and this you can see the flow is depicted here with the help of arrows, and the different materials can be depicted by different colors also. So this is seawater cooling pumps here, and it is the pumps are pumping the sea water. So this way you can depict the movements, the arrows depict the movement. Here you can see this is another arrow, this is another arrow here. So basically a flow diagram can also be depicted, can be used for depicting the movement of water or maybe a movement of a fluid through the industry, where how the movement of the material is taking place. So here the facilities are fixed at their respective places, but there is a movement of material. In the other case we have seen where we have focused on the manufacture of a bicycle pedal, there also the movement of material was shown. So in many cases movement of material can be depicted, in some cases the movement of men can also be depicted. If we go back to what we have started our discussion with today, we have started our discussion with by differentiating between a flow process chart and a flow diagram. And if you remember, a person is serving food to the patients in a hospital on 17 different beds. In that case, what is being depicted? The movement of the worker or the movement of the men is being depicted, but here the movement of the material is being depicted. So flow diagrams can be used for depicting the movement of men and material. Now the flow diagram is a drawing, again and again same things are coming, but I think these will make the things absolutely clear once we are finished with this topic. The flow diagram is a drawing drawn substantially. Now this is one additional information that we want to provide here. It is usually drawn to the scale. So it is flow diagram usually drawn to the scale of the factory or the work area, correctly indicating the positions of the various facilities. And if you refer back to the flow process chart, the location of the various facilities is not depicted in the flow process chart. We write the description of the work or the activities or the inspections or the movement, but then we depict it with the help of the process chart symbols in case of flow process chart. But in flow diagram we will make the exact layout of the facilities to the scale within the organization or within the workshop or within the shop. It is to the scale and correct indication of the positions and the facilities. Then coming on to the paths of movements of the product or its component are traced using the process chart symbols. So we can track the movement, we can plot the paths of movement. For example, the paths of movement can be depicted by the arrow as we use in case of our process chart or flow process chart. The paths of movement of the product or its components are traced using the process chart symbol. All these symbols are connected to each other by lines and arrows which represent sequence and dependency relationship. So that can be very easily done. If you have attended the sessions in our course on operations management, we have studied CPM and PERT there. So we have dependency relationship among the various activities, that Y can only start if X has been completed. So flow diagrams can help us to depict the dependency of the activities also, that this can only be done when the previous activity is over. And if you remember, maybe for a steam generation flow process diagram, if we draw for steam generation, we will have the movement of water in a specific direction only. So maybe we can relate that this has happened, now this is going to happen with the help of arrows. So that is one thing which is easily done or easily can be done using the flow diagrams. Now this is just a steps I will read for you. If you have understood, it is easy for you to draw the flow diagram. Draw to scale the plan of the work area, or draw the area in which you want to draw the flow diagram. Mark the relative position of machine tools, benches, store, racks, inspection tables, etc. So you mark all the facilities within the working area, that is the area that you have identified. From the different observations, draw the actual movement of the materials or men. If you want to mark the movement for the materials, then you focus on materials, or if you want to mark the movement of men, then you can focus on men. And if you mark the movement of both, there is a movement of material as well as men, then you can use different colors to depict the movement of men and material. Indicate the direction of movement, that is important because it will help us to establish the dependency relationships, like X can only be done when Y has been completed. Mark the distances between the two consecutive locations. So since it has to be done on scale, so when we are doing it on scale, it is always important to mark the distances also. Now this is one diagram, simple flow diagram. The facilities are given here, machines A, these are the machines, and this is storage here. So all the facilities are marked and the movement is also shown, and if you see, this is an arrow, this is an arrow. So the arrows will always help us to look at the direction of work or direction of movement. So if you see, this is working area, within working area we have the facilities which are marked like I and H, these are the facilities, and all facilities wherever they are as per their exact location within the working area, and the movement of man and material is marked with the help of arrows. Now this is one example which we have already seen. This is another flow diagram here. This is the flow diagram, this is the original method, and this is the other one is the proposed method. This is the proposed method, this is the original method. So we can see in original method, if we combine the summary, operations in the present method are 4, in the proposed method there are only 3, the transportations are 21 and 15, delays are 3 and 2. So we can say the proposed method is a better method as compared to the current method. And here we can see the in original method, the various facilities are marked: store, stripping, degreaser, cooling, cleaning. So this is basically a flow diagram for engine stripping, cleaning and degreasing. So original method and proposed method. And if you see, we have changed the layout, these 3 positions 3, 4, 3, 3 and 4 can be replaced. So here we can see the proposed method, we have marked them with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, and in the current method they are marked as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So when you change, this is a broad change which has been brought in the layout, which has significantly reduced the transportation and operation. So basic idea to understand is that how a flow diagram would look like, and this is the depiction of flow diagram, the current and the improved method, and we can compare the two using this type of an comparative table, and this you can see is a material type of comparison. So here we are checking the movement of the material. So this is one example of flow diagrams, and which this can help us to design the layout in the most efficient and effective manner. Now what can be the advantages? A flow diagram is essentially a flow process chart drawn to, so I have already explained it is essentially a flow process chart, but what is the exact difference between the two has already been cleared in the beginning of today's session. Show the layout of the facility. So, the flow diagram will be able to show the layout of the facility, whereas the flow process chart cannot show the layout of a facility. Shows the flow of work through that area. Sequence can be shown by flow process chart, but the flow of work is difficult. The movement of the work in the various facilities within the organization is difficult, but our flow diagram will be able to show this. Show overcrowding areas, crossing worker paths, total travel, etc. Identify how this is the most important point. It can help us to identify how layout can be redesigned to reduce the travel, motion and collisions, etc. So, we can avoid the backtracking, we can avoid the redundancy, we can avoid the collisions between the material when it is moving. So, we can identify the areas where there is lot of congestion and we can redesign the layout in order to avoid that congestion. But how do we come to know that there is going to be congestion in that area? That will only be able to understood, or that would only be able to be depicted with the help of a flow diagram only. Store materials near where they are used. This is also flow diagrams will help us with it, and this will increase the efficiency and the safety because it avoids collision. There is not much more movement in a restricted area because we have already identified that lot of lines are crisscrossing from a particular point. We can redesign the things in such a way that that path is avoided or it is used for a limited number of movements only. So, with this we can conclude the today's session. And what is the summary of this week? In this week we have covered different techniques to name that flow. We have covered flow process chart, we have covered two-handed process chart, we have covered the multi-activity chart, we have covered the flow diagram, and very quickly I have tried to explain the difference between the flow process chart and the flow diagram. So, with this we conclude the today's session, and in next session we will carry forward our discussion with other important graphical tools related to method study. In case there is still a doubt between the flow process chart and the flow diagram, you are most welcome to write on the discussion board, and we would be more than happy to respond to your queries if any. Thank you very much.